So thanks everybody for coming on out on this rainy evening, which I am grateful for, because I need rain. And yeah, we've got an awesome presentation tonight by Dan. And yeah, I believe you would like to say a few words.
Yeah, well, thanks everyone for coming. My name's Amy Miller. I'm the marketing manager at ILM. And we have our annual Minnesota Developers Conference coming up on September 27th. And honestly, there are 24 tickets left, I think. I just checked right before. So if you're thinking about going or your company's going to pay for your ticket, tell them not to wait. Because we sell out every year. The keynote, if you haven't heard, is Scott Hanselman, but also Dan will be speaking there if you want to watch this presentation again. There are 20 sessions this year, so it should be a great conference. That's it.
Thank you. Thank you.
And thank you for the food.
Yeah.
Yep, and ILM, of course, is our awesome host and sponsor, so thank you very much. And then we have, I think we got some news items here and stuff. We are recording, so this will get up on YouTube, and so the last one's almost ready to go. And we're going to try to turn these around quicker here in the future. We're not streaming tonight. We may in the future, but the streaming stuff is a little funky, and we haven't quite worked out the bugs there. But let's go ahead and start with some news and events.
All right. How many people ordered iPhone 7s? Oh, wow. Really? Jeez, I guess I'm by myself. Did you get one?
No.
This is. You guys like your headphone jacks, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I guess that's just me.
I'm
Everybody
planning on it, so that makes sense. I'm planning on it. Just didn't do it yet.
Okay. Good.
Well, all the pluses
So it's
are
not planned.
all the pluses are sold out. You can't get them; they're gone, and you can't go to an Apple store to get a plus. So you're dead. You're toast. Can't get one. Not till like November. And all the piano black ones are also gone, and you're not gonna be able to get those until like November, December. So they're all gone. You can't go to the store. You can't get them. You got to go online. Wait.
You actually got so many pre-orders like I didn't.
There's no way to get a plus, and there's no way to get a piano black. Not until like November.
I think this also has to do with the upgrade program that they introduced last go around.
Yeah.
Because there's a big hoopla about that right now too, where a bunch of, I think there's a class action lawsuit actually, where the people who had signed up for the upgrade program previously are not able to upgrade their phones this go around, or there's not the stock for it, and they're upset. So we'll see where that goes.
You can always go to Note 7.
That exposes your pocket, right?
Or they'll charge only 70%.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, the big news items that we wanted to touch on tonight were obviously the new iPhone, new watches. Anybody order a new watch? Wow, okay. You call your mobile group what?
I didn't look at it.
Everybody's waiting until Christmas, I guess.
Yeah, it's waterproof up to 50 meters.
Yeah,
and
GPS.
GPS,
It's
and
faster.
Same
It's
price.
waterproof.
I think so, or is it a little cheaper?
I think it's-
I don't know, 369 was the small entry.
The
That's
other,
like $20 less or something.
when you go online, you can see a video of it shooting the water out of the speaker. So the water gets trapped in the speaker, and then when you finish your swim workout, which you can swim with it, you turn the crown, and it plays a sound, and it shoots water out of the speaker. It's pretty awesome.
It is pretty cool.
I was impressed by it. I might get an Apple Watch someday. Certainly better than the first one.
That's right. The other items were obviously they released Xcode 8. Has everybody updated Xcode 8 at least? That's got to be more hands, right? Okay, few more. And then I think next week is macOS Sierra. I'm not in a huge hurry for that, but I think the big thing coming there is Siri on the Mac. I don't care about Siri necessarily, but some of you may. The other thing I want to touch on about Apple was that they've made an announcement that they're going to start essentially purging apps from the store that are old, not kept up. They don't meet, their current UI guidelines and standards. I'm not sure if, there's probably other apps in the store that are non-64-bit, probably.
Yes.
And if your app crashes on startup, they're going to kick you out. I mean, they send you an email and you've got 30 days to fix it, and if you don't, it's out. So, which is actually a good thing. This probably should have happened a long time ago. And I think they're also changing some things with search on the store too, which should help. But that's it from Apple that I can think of. Android Nougat was officially released since we last met. And Xamarin is officially supporting that in iOS 10 as of their latest updates. I think Xamarin Studio 6.1 is also got Nougat enhancements for, I think, versioning of your Nougat package is kind of nice for a change. They're going to have like a little drop down in the bottom right hand corner. There's a new weekly Xamarin show on Channel 9 that we should all check out. So every week on Channel 9 they're going to have a new, I think James Montemagno's putting it on, and yeah, check out weekly show on Xamarin.
Yep, I think that's pretty cool.
That's all I got for news.
Yeah.
Anybody have anything else?
How do you guys feel about the earphone jack?
So the phone doesn't come with it, right?
The phone comes with the adapter, and it comes with the earpods that connect into the lightning port.
So the classical ones. The Bluetooth is like $150, right?
The AirPods like $160, yeah.
And those don't ship till
But those have like IRs that detect if they're in your ear or not, and they like when you pull them out, it like actually like pauses your music. And they got accelerometers, so when you tap them, it like plays pause. It does they do a bunch of crazy stuff.
Yeah.
So they're pretty cool.
Yeah, I think they're pretty cool.
Yeah.
I don't think are they Bluetooth or are they
They're
something different?
well, it's a weirdo spec. It's like a thing that sits on top of Bluetooth, and Apple's got this proprietary pairing UI.
Of course they do.
But they do pair with existing Android and older iOS stuff. But
Okay.
the cool pairing, the easy stuff is all through just proprietary Apple
The
stuff.
W1 chip.
Yeah.
So what about the radiation going into your brain?
Yeah.
Oh, it's milliwatts.
It's a lot.
It's milliwatts.
So, I mean, you've already got cancer from your cell phone, so it doesn't
Is your phone in your pocket?
Yeah.
No.
Nice try.
Yeah.
So, yeah. What do we got next?
Intros.
Intro is great. Dan, go ahead and introduce yourself and lead right in. And
So my name is Dan Edgar. I'm a principal consultant here at ILM. Currently contracted out to Dow Jones, and I've been working on the Barron's for iOS application and a little bit on the Wall Street Journal for iOS application, and did a lot of other stuff, tons and tons, almost all native mobile front end. A little bit of Xamarin here and there, but mostly .NET and actually the pure native stacks for Objective-C and Swift and lots of other stuff. So we're here today to talk about this side project that I kind of took on and what I learned while I took on this side project. It is historically motivated, and you'll see my motivation as we move through here. So I'm just going to jump right in here. So what many of you may know about the Battle of Midway may be limited to the video game. The classic Nintendo, old school 1943 video game. Everybody remembers this guy. Yes, lightning attacks, power-ups, it's made of awesome. But there's a few inaccuracies with this guy. Number one, it wasn't 1943, it was 1942. And unfortunately, the super cool P-38 Lightning that you shot all the cool guns out of, yeah, that wasn't even there. It was actually, the closest it was the Aleutian Islands during the Battle of Midway, and it was actually deflecting a mock Japanese attack to actually deflect from the Battle of Midway at the time. The real good point in there was the SB-3 Dauntless, and good is relative because the United States wasn't doing so good in 1942. But that was the dive bomber that did most of the damage to Japanese carriers in Midway. All right, the other way you might know about Midway is the old school 1970s classic. I mean, come on, if it's got Charlton Heston and Henry Fonda in it, how can it be bad, right? It's 3.5 hours of pure war footage and blood and guts stuff. And it turns out this movie is based off this book. And this book is called Miracle at Midway. And it's by this guy named Gordon W. Prange, and if I'm murdering his name, I apologize in advance. He got a bunch of, I think he's a professor at a college, and he got a bunch of his master's students together, and they went out and did all these interviews. And they glommed all these things into this book, so they got a lot of neat little stories. The book is interesting, it's largely top-down, but if you've seen the movie, you've probably actually read the book. The book got me interested in trying to figure out history stuff and where I could get data points, maybe do some other things. Let's see now, a little more history on Midway. This is Midway. It's two little itty bitty pieces of sand that are actually sitting at the end of the Hawaiian archipelago. The reason Midway was important was because the Japanese wanted to take over that airfield, and they wanted to take that airfield and they actually wanted to send bombers over Pearl Harbor. And they figured once they had that, and once they had Pearl Harbor gone, they could keep moving forward and continue to move forward. But it's literally just a thing out there in the middle of nowhere. Historically, it was a coal depot for the old steamers, and it just became more important, obviously, during World War II. So, when you hear the Battle of Midway, the reason it's, you've obviously probably heard of it before, the reason it's so important is because it showed for the very first time, it showed the importance of naval aviation during World War in any sort of conflict. So before it was about battleships, battleships, battleships. As much armament and as much stuff as you could throw at the shore was important. What they found out really quick was, well, battleships were kind of going away because you had these things called airplanes. And airplanes had a better range, and you could actually get more stuff to more targets easier. Well, that really wasn't known, quite frankly, until Battle of Midway. And even the people who were there didn't really realize the significance of it until they took out 4 Japanese carriers to 1 US carrier. And those 4 Japanese carriers were the same group that actually invaded Pearl Harbor. And by taking those 4 Japanese carriers out, it distinctly, just totally skewed the balance. And most people say that in 1942 and the Battle of Midway is when Japan lost the war.
So what does a carrier carry?
Carrier carries aircraft.
Oh.
So aircraft carriers. That's the other stat at the bottom there. Japan lost 332 aircraft. And you guys can go and read on this. Wikipedia is better for this than me reciting it to you. The reason Japan lost so many aircraft was because they were sitting on deck when the dive bombers came in and took out the aircraft. So, interesting story. There's lots of neat stuff that happens in and around it. And the people who were in the battle at the time, history is never known by the people in it. And that kind of got me fascinated. And I wanted to start kind of digging into this more. The book, like I say, is largely told from the top down. You hear about the admiral, you hear about the captains, you hear about you hear top down. However, there's a great story to be told, I think, from bottom up. And I wanted to surface more of those kind of stories and figure out what happened, a year before and a year after, and maybe find a way to visualize that and process all this stuff and tell those stories. To reinforce that point, this is a really bad diagram. The Department of Defense is not good at these. From European Theater of Operations in 1945. So out of all the people from the United States military that were in Europe in 1945, only 39% were in a combat role, 61% were actually either in logistics, life support, or admin. So you see the war movies and maybe you're getting a chunk of the 39%, but there's a lot of other stories and a lot of other stuff that must have happened over here too. And once again, I wanted to find a way to surface that, and being a computer geek, there's got to be some data source or something I can process on this stuff, right? Maybe there's some way I can bring that up. As a side note, everything I'm going to talk about is very US-centric. It's very, very America, America, America. The reason for that is just the data source I had. Quite frankly, if anybody knows a source of Japanese naval history, let me know. I would love to try and figure out a way to process it, but I can't read Japanese, so that's the other reason it's English. But once again, there's some great stories. Even in the book Battle of Midway, they did a good job of bringing the Japanese perspective into it, and they had interviewed a lot of the Japanese higher-ups about what happened there. So it's quite good. All right, so once again, the good about this book, lots of facts. There's some interesting maps and charts. They actually had there's a chart in there. I didn't get a chance to pull the image, but they ask an admiral, where were you at this time? And he's like, I don't know, I just put a big question mark on a chart and handed it in. So it's pretty neat. The bad, it's a wall of text, and you end up with all these weird things like VT8 off of Yorktown at this time, went at this location to here, and it's a lot of words. There's got to be a way to view it, to visualize it, to see it. So in that vein, I started looking for a little bit of inspiration on visualizing stuff like this. And I highly suggest going to this website, The Fallen of World War II. This is super awesome. They do a great job of taking all the casualties and all the people who died during World War II and categorizing it, slicing it, dicing it, presenting it in a really great movie. It really brings scope and scale to, like for example, this is just a really, it's a 15-minute movie. It's totally worth your time to watch. But in this chart right here, everything that's in red is representative of the number of people the Soviet Union lost. And here is the beginning of World War II, here's the end of World War II. And notice this hasn't even filled up yet for how many people the Soviet Union lost.
26 million.
Yeah, like 6 million. Yeah, they lost way more people, and this includes civilians and soldiers. And once again, the movie does an amazing job of really scoping the human impact of World War II down, and really putting it like into perspective. They do an amazing job. I highly suggest visualizing, going there and just marveling at the visualization. This is another classic. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Edward Tufte. Edward Tufte's out there. This is a classic where all the way to that side there in the brown line, that's Napoleon's army before he marches to Moscow. He marches all the way across to Moscow. The black line is the retreat from Moscow and how many soldiers were left when he returned back to France at the end. On the bottom here is the fun correlating factor. This is the air temperature during the return trip. So you can watch as they hit cold, gets colder, they lose more people. This is one of those classics where you could actually kind of look at it for a while. It brings on, it shows the specific rivers they crossed and when they crossed them as geographic features. Once again, it's just a really nice example of a data visualization and something I'm kind of trying to aim for in real time given the data source. Not just a flat poster, but maybe there's a way to actually get the data to do stuff like this. Now, I don't get anywhere near this. This is just inspiration, but I'm going to throw it up there anyway so you guys can check it out. This was actually more inspiring to me than maybe even the Napoleon one. This is a great website, gotta go there, that gives you the history of all the Star Wars characters. So it's all the Star Wars movies mapped out. Every character is a line, and every bar is an event that occurs in one of the movies. So in this case, this is the original Star Wars movie. The bar I highlighted was where Luke Skywalker goes back and finds out Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru are dead. So if you check it out, Owen and Beru's lines end tragically right there. But you can actually scroll through the entire movie and look at the entire history of the Star Wars movie and see which characters collided with which characters at what time. And it's a beautiful example of JavaScript, awesome data visualization thing. And when I saw this, I'm like, you mean Star Wars has a better way to visualize their history than history does? So, sir?
Is his aunt's name Meru or Beru?
Beru. So Aunt Beru. Oh, it's a typo on the website. Get them. I just took a screenshot from the
Okay.
website. It's on Beru from Star Wars. But anyway, check that out. Super cool.
Huh?
You know, you Star Wars off.
Pretty much, yeah.
You better call them, tell them they're correct. The URL's down there. It's in the slides. Go yell at them. I didn't even catch that. But yeah, someone spent way too much time putting the whole history of Star Wars together and did an awesome job. So once again, I wanted some way to like do this for real, like against real history. So I started digging and started looking around, and I'm going to go to my good version of this. And I was looking for a data source for like the Battle of Midway stuff. I wanted to know. Get my mind node. Too many icons two at a time. There we go. So this is the entire tech tree of what I'm going to talk about for the rest of the talk. I'm going to zoom in here. There we go. So up here at the top, I have my crazy idea, and I want to find a data source that I can actually use. And in this case, I want a data source that's going to have some kind of naval history, ships, people, locations, something I can take and then create a whole data set of, and eventually maybe map it out, see where ships were before and after the Battle of Midway, that kind of thing. Just start small and figure out where I'm going to go. So I started looking around for data sources, and I find this thing called DANFS, and DANFS is the Dictionary of American Naval Fighting Ships. So it turns out this DANFS thing is an OCR version of a book, and it's something like 13,000 individual ship histories. So it's an OCR version of this giant book. And it's turned into a website. Some awesome guy took the website, turned it into a SQLite database. So I've got a SQLite database with imagine, and we'll get through a lot of this, but imagine I got a SQLite database with like 13,000 rows, a row per ship, with an HTML per ship. That's the starting data source, that's where we're coming from. So I take all that and I run it through this C#.NET crazy process I've got to try and extract out all the data, turn it into additional SQLite stuff that contains location names, geocoded data, ship names, dates, any data I can get so I can try and cross-correlate all this stuff. Of course, that turns into flat files and SQLite files. And from those flat files and SQLite files, I just shove them into a Xamarin mobile app. And that Xamarin mobile app has a portable layer that's able to read all the data from the SQLite and the flat files. And then we visualize it using all the cool stuff in iOS through Xamarin.iOS. So that's the whole tech tree. That's the rest of the talk. Now the fun part about this, and we'll get there, is this thing called Stanford NER. I call it NER, but it's Named Entity Recognition. And we'll get to that. Remember, I'm just one guy. I'm not going to sit there and go through 13,000 individual documents marking up locations and ship names and all that. Forget it. There's no way I'm going to do that. I have a computer that can do that. Let's figure out a way to make it happen. So we'll continue on to these slides here. There we go. So, like I said, I need data. And I'd love to have naval ship logs that are like in a chronological order with their locations. So I find this DANFS thing. It's about maybe 13,000 individual ship histories, all of them in HTML that were OCR'd over from a giant source. So special thank you to J.R. Null off of GitHub. Whoever you are, wherever you are, you're awesome. He's some kind of crazy Pythonista guy, and he wrote this insane thing that skimmed the whole website and made this started SQLite database for me. So he's awesome. He even had the SQLite thing already up there. He even maintains it. It's crazy. I don't even know what he's using it for, but I took it right away. So DANFS is funky, right? I mean, it's literally like, it's almost like handwritten type ship histories. And it's got dates, which are good, mixed with locations, and dates mixed with locations, and dates mixed with locations, and they're largely in order. So if I can find a way to get this stuff out of there, I'm probably pretty good as far as generating a binary history for all this stuff. So first problem I'm going to attack is dates, because I see a date that looks like a fairly easy format and it repeats out, and I look through 10 or 20 of these individual files, and the dates all look about the same. So the first thing I say is, cool, that's got to be a regular expression. I'll yank that out. But before I do anything, I look at the statistics on data scientist stuff. And it turns out when you're a data scientist, you don't spend a whole lot of time actually mining your data and looking at your data sets. You spend way more time cleaning and refining your data than you ever do actually traversing through your data set. So I saw this graph and I got this far and it made me sad. But I knew hey, you got to start somewhere. I'm looking for data stuff. So I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time playing with my cool little iOS app browsing Navy history. I'm going to be spending a whole lot more time worrying about data cleaning and data sources and finding new things to pull out. So here is a crazy wall of text that should never be on a slide in front of people. But the rough process for me cleaning my data is I'm going to take this SQLite database this guy came out with. I'm going to take all those HTML files that are sitting in there, turn them into XML using System.Xml.Linq. I'm going to take regular expressions and pull out all the date times. I'm going to use this thing called Named Entity Recognition to pull out all the location names. Then I'm going to put all of this into a bunch of SQLite databases all correlated. And I'm going to get my location names. I'm going to feed location names back to Google so I get latitude, longitude of all my location names. and loop through and continue to refine and make the data better as I go. So, I keep going. In DANFS, the general format for everything is, it looks something like this. I'll pull up their website, because their website is actually, escape. Keynote hates me today.
Oh,
There we go. So if I go to a DANFS page here, the general format is this big data block about a ship up front here. So they tell you its displacement in the water, length, beam, and some cool number stuff. They tell you like the reason the ship is named, in this case Meade. So in this case it's named after a guy named Richard Warsman Meade. And then they actually go through the entire ship history and the ship log of where it visited, how it got there, what happened with it. So that's the general format, and it's just, once again, it's just text. There's no magic markup in here, there's nothing, it's just text, that's all I've got. So we've got 13,000 of these I want to try and process somehow. So, I'll go back to Keynote. So like I said, the dates seemed pretty regular, so first thing I do is, you Google the regular expression. Everybody does it, come on, face up. If you ever have to do a regular expression, you're not sitting there thinking you're gonna pull it off from scratch, you're gonna Google it. And right after you Google it, what do? Yeah, you just start throwing anything and everything you can in there to get that regular expression to do something. Regular expressions are evil, and then once you do this, of course, you forget about it, and so you have to do it the next time.
What RegEx tool do you use on a regular basis?
So I found this cool website, RegEx 101. This was the slickest one I found, far and away. I of course Googled and found my starting one, and I don't even want to. I'm embarrassed to admit that damn thing probably took me a weekend to figure that stupid thing out.
So
But
on Mac, there's a great program called Patterns. It's like $2 or something
Cool.
in the App Store.
cool.
Me and Adam use it all the time. It's pretty decent.
Cool. But since I wrote this one, I haven't written another one, so.
Nice.
But I found this, once again, this cool website. It lets you put in a test string at the bottom, and it shows you which things got recognized, and then it has your regex at the top. Super simple, super easy, it's free. And those are the examples of the dates I pulled out of the text. So, standard regular expression stuff. And when I was done, I took my regular expression. I have to turn the lights off. But, can you guys read that or not? Probably,
We'll
because
turn
I
off the
have a
lights.
few more crazy code examples. That's the reason I'm bringing it up. So now everybody can go to sleep. It looks like. So when I'm done, I went through all the text from the DANFS stuff, and I just I put inline XML and shoved it right into the document. So I'm able to process 8 January 1943, and now I've got XML for that. Now the fun part was, a lot of the dates that are in there don't have a year associated. So I said, well, okay, cool. What I'll do is I'll just, where my XML is, wherever I find that date, because I just have an XML DOM, everything's cool, I'll just traverse up the DOM until I find the one with the nearest year that matches that, and I'll shove that in and interpolate it. So, data cleaning, issue number 1. And when you do that, and I don't think I did it, so I better go back and do it, I usually throw an extra tag on there like guess or interpolated, so you know that the date was guessed. So, once again, HTML to XML, and use regular expressions. Now I've got a lot of cool dates, all of them in line. I also take all those dates and I associate it to the ship document they were in and shove into a SQLite database. And I do some other stuff with them too, we'll get to it later. So data cleaning, this is a lot of fun. So you're doing your data cleaning, everything's great, you got your .NET system date time and everything's cool, and then you hit June 31st. And everything fires an exception and your 5-hour-long data process dies because some ship's captain put in June 31st. Not fun. Or April 31st or February 29th on a day that wasn't, on a year that wasn't a leap year. These are the kind of things that make me sad. But they can be cleaned up, obviously. It's just one of those fun things you hit and don't really realize.
So when do you change it to then?
Well, in this case, I just said cool. I mean, if you think it's the 31st of April, I'll just turn it to 30th. And in the case of February, same thing. I say, okay, cool. Just turn it into the nearest valid date going down. So obviously, they didn't mean March 1st. They meant February 28th or whatever. There were a lot of February 29th. I don't know why the Navy did that. That was crazy. There must have been like 200 February 29ths hidden throughout all those documents. It was crazy. So I got dates pulled out, and that seems pretty decent. But now I need locations. But the locations are locked in plain text, and I'm not going to go through 11,000 documents and every time I see the word California, mark it up by hand. I mean, that'd be crazy. I'm not going to do that. I've got a life and I've got a computer. So if you look at the text, it's just going to be your pretty standard text. It's going to have like Elizabeth, Pennsylvania. It might have PA, it might have PENN, it might have P capital A. There's no way for me to know all the variants of that. In addition, there might be stuff without states, like Vicksburg. There's no way that I'm going to go through by hand to do all this. So I went out and I found this crazy thing called the Stanford Named Entity Recognizer. And what this is actually a Java library that uses a machine-learned training data set that you can feed raw text into, and it will actually classify stuff in that text across certain lines that the machine was trained for. Notice I said it was in Java. This is the first time I ran into this thing called IKVM. I don't know if any of you have heard of it, but it sounds like it's a little mini Java virtual machine that runs inside of .NET and lets you, more or less exposes the API of the Java objects to .NET. This is all up on NuGet. You can pull this down as a package. It includes everything you need. And the guy who did it, his name is Sergey Tihan. I believe that's his last name. Beware, he's one of those F-sharp people. He's very F-sharp. He tweets like 10 tweets a day all about how F-sharp is awesome. So just beware. But this named entity recognizer saved my bacon. And I'm going to go through this a little bit. So this is machine learning in 4 bullet points or less. Obviously this is impossible, but I'm going to try anyway. So in this case, the way the machine learning stuff worked is you take lots and lots of known definitions for data. So you have lots and lots of known locations. You got lots and lots of words that you know aren't locations. So there's your 2 chunks of data. You run all that through this thing called a training engine, and then that shoots out this thing called a model. The model more or less says, hey, cool, thanks for those locations, thanks for things that weren't locations. Now I'm going to try and guess every time you feed me a chunk of text as to whether or not a chunk of that text is actually a location or not. So this is my evil diagram here. Everything on the top is done, so this is how you use it in code, and this is the quick and dirty kind of diagram of it. Everything on the top is handed for you for free by the Stanford people. So they take these training sets, and I haven't dug into these yet, but I think these are just big lists of words and locations. You can look them up on the internet. One's called Muck7, Muck6, and call NLL 2003, and that's your data. They shove that through an engine, and they create this thing called a classifier. When I say classifier model, it means roughly the same thing. And this classifier is now trained to look for 3, 7, or 4 things. So in my case, I'm using the 3 class model, which says, hey, go through text and find me all the locations, people, and organizations in that given chunk of text. Otherwise, you have a 4 class, which says location, person, organization, and miscellaneous. I have no idea what miscellaneous is. I haven't run through the 4 class one yet. And there's also a 7 class one that'll give you location, person, organization, money, percent, date, and time. So the 7 class model scared me. I only needed a 3 class model. Someday I'm going to run through the other models. But in the .NET code, so this is given to you, in your .NET code, you take your plain text files, you take your text as strings, you rev up this CRF classifier from your NuGet package, you call one method called classify, and out shoots on the other end, literally one line, classify with inline XML, feed it your text value, and that classifier result is just your text as XML with all that stuff marked up in it. And it looks like that when you're done. So you can just take a whole paragraph of text, shove it in, and it will go through and it will automatically say, cool, Pearl Harbor's a location, Guam's a location, Iwo Jima's a location, Saipan's a location. Yes, sir.
So is it smart enough to figure out, like, some of the battles were named after locations, right? Or some of the ships were named after locations?
So, great question, and here's how I got around that. I got real lucky to get around that. Turns out the DANFS thing, every time a ship name is mentioned, it's in italic tags. I got so lucky. You have no idea how lucky I got. Because when you're working with the USS Abraham Lincoln and that guy comes out as a person every time, and no, it's not a person, it's a ship. And there's no way for you to know whether it is or not, but then you find out there's italics in there, you're like, thank you.
Yeah.
So I got lucky there. The other thing is, and we'll get to other ways to remedy that later too. I can go through some other alternative techniques there. So anyway, so I go through this whole thing, and I got one outlier here. There's this Einwatak. That's actually not an organization. It is this awesome, cool island in the middle of the Pacific. It's got beaches. Oh, it's beautiful. But it's definitely a location that I want to get, right?
So did you have to do any training at all? Or?
So I'll show you. Great question, and hopefully I'll answer in the next couple of slides. So, so I went through, and the first thing I said was, well, I don't know what percentage confidence it thinks that thing is actually an organization with. So it turns out that the whole NER thing actually gives you the ability to get the percentage confidence per thing it classified. And it's this cool thing if you ever dig into it. It's called a click tree. It's an API they give you for free. And you can now get the percentages. And when you put the percentages back in there, it knows with the 99% probability that Pearl Harbor's a location. It knows Einwatak is, well, it's only 43% thinks it's an organization. The weird one is, why does it think Iwo Jima is only 53%? I don't know. But, so that's kind of neat. And what's cool is, of course, is as you're mining through that, you can use that as an indicator. But obviously it doesn't 100% solve my problem, right? It's still got this Einwatak thing. I still think it's an organization. It didn't solve my problem. There's, of course, two ways to solve that. One, hard code it. Don't do that. The other way is to retrain the model. The Stanford NER has the ability to be retrained. So I can take my Einwatak guy, and I can now shove in my special DANFS training data, in addition to all the other training data, regenerate the classifier. Now it's got my special DANFS training kind of imbued into the machine. And now when I call that method the next time, it'll include my new cool DANFS training. Now, I haven't done this yet. It is entirely possible. The problem is, if you dig into it, Stanford NER can't give you the original data sources it used to train it. You gotta go out and buy them. And I think they cost money. I don't know how much they cost. And once you've got the money and once you've got them, you can retrain all this, and now you can get a much smarter machine learning model. But for what I wanted to do in my initial purposes, what the heck? I mean, it gets me pretty close, and dang, that was pretty easy, and I can run 11,000 documents through all this. That's no problem, right? So machine learning stuff, obviously it's huge, it's hot, it's a big deal. There's a lot of other resources you can go out there and get. One of my favorite ones that I saw demoed was the Google Prediction API. A guy took you can go to GitHub and get the data for the bikes that are downtown, the green bikes, and you can see where they were bought from and where they were dropped off, and you can track the bikes all the way around the city. So a guy at the minibar, I gave a good presentation at minibar, where he would take a bike from a given station at a given time of day, and he could predict with a certain percentage where that bike would end up and what time it would end up there, because he fed it all to the Google Prediction API. It's pretty neat. And that's like free, and that's just sitting out there, and you can just use that. The other fun thing is the Stanford Natural Language Processing. This is a model that actually the NER stuff is built on top of. The natural language processing goes a step further and give you like sentence structure. It can get into verbs and nouns and adjectives, and it can give you like this crazy interactive map of a sentence and do some crazy stuff. I haven't dug all the way through it, but there's ways to integrate that as well. And then there's these two awesome articles I recently ran into. One's called Machine Learning in a Year and Machine Learning in a Week. And they'll be in the slides when you go up, and you can take a look at it. If you Google those two, I'm pretty sure you'll find out, find those resources. They're really good. They get way more in depth into what machine learning is and where you can apply it and how you can use it. So I got my locations cracked out. but I want lat launch, right? So I go out and I find out there is this awesome API from Google where all you got to do is shove the location name into the address of the query string, and it'll give you back JSON for that given location. And I'm like, yes, this is awesome. And then I hit the fact that I can only geocode about 150 a day because it's IP limited without an API key from Google. And I have 20,000 locations that I need to run through the coder. So anyway, don't tell Google, but every time I visit a new IP, I would run this thing and just keep getting my collected JSON. But anyway, it's pretty cool. And when you're geocoding, don't end up on Null Island. This is another classic, if you dig up the Wall Street Journal thing, where sometimes your geocoding goes bad and you end up either in the center of Kansas or you end up on Null Island in the middle of nowhere. So when you get to your return from the Google geocoding thing, I highlighted the fun one, of course, which is, hey, I got my lat launch, it's awesome. But they give you lots of other crazy stuff too. So that I'm a top island, they'll actually give you like the southwest and the northeast and the southwest lat launch, so you can actually draw a square around it. They'll give you crazy stuff like outer zip codes and its lat launch region. It's pretty neat what they give you, but I just cared about that, so I was happy. I recorded it all, of course, so for future use. Don't tell Google. The other thing I did when I was going through all that data was I GUIDed it all. So anytime I'd get a new date or a new location or a new anything, I'd GUID it and shove it in the XML document, and then I'd also record that GUID into a SQLite database behind the scenes. So what this allows me to do later on is now I can take my entire data source and I can query and slice and dice it. Then I can find the source document and zap right to that given location in the source document. And I did this with dates and locations, and you'll see that in the iOS app when we run through it. It's a really cheap, easy, efficient technique. I mean, everyone's probably done it, but in this case it was really, really, really easy. GUID, new GUID for the win. So, yes, my data cleaning code looked like what's behind this guy, and it still looks like that today. It is cross-wired, if-then statements, crazy, insane stuff. And what I found out is if it doesn't look like that, you're probably doing it wrong, or your data set's like the greatest data set ever. So I probably iterated through my whole data set 50, 60 times, and you kind of guess the cleanliness based on some of the database stuff, based on some of the outputs, based on how you're watching it. But you hit a point where it kind of stabilizes, and you're at a crossroads, and you're not 100% sure if what you got's worth it or not. In this case, and I'm at this point right now, what you're going to see in the iOS app, this is literally where I'm at right now. So I got all these ship history XML formats. I figure my dates are about 90%. I figure the locations are actually about 70%. I figure my date plus location associations are maybe 50 to 60%. And my geocode results return multiple values, and I just got to pick one lat launch. So I don't think it's great, but it's good enough to start or keep going. Here's an example. I eyeball this. Here's another crazy wall of text. So as I'm eyeballing this, and I got my cool date here, and then I start looking, I go, oh, on the 28th. So February 20th, and then on February 28th, I'm like, dang, I missed a date scenario. I may have to go back and figure out a way to get those extra dates included. The other interesting thing is, so I got a date, I got lots of locations between the dates. That's good. That means I can actually say that this ship was in Saipan, Okinawa, maybe, we'll get back to that, Leyte Gulf, Carmaretto, between February 20th and March 26th. That's not bad. That's pretty good. We can work with that. Where it gets bad here is you start realizing some of your fake data. So in this case, they're saying, to prepare for the upcoming Okinawa invasion. Well, the ship wasn't going to Okinawa. It was preparing for an Okinawa invasion. So someday I'll figure out a way to get rid of that, probably through natural language processing. But for today, I'll let it stand. Okinawa's in there somewhere. The map might go like this, but you know, good enough, right? So like I said, I'm just going to barrel forward, and I want to visualize this thing and see how bad it really is. So when I was done, this gives you an idea on the amount of stuff that I processed out of this. So I pulled out 230,805 dates from the 13,000 documents, recorded about 20,000 separate locations, and I got 299,000 date plus location associations, and all of those are in individual SQLite tables. And I'm like, plus I'm lazy. I don't want to code a backend service for all this. I wonder if it'll all just work running on the device. And it should. Those numbers seem reasonable. What the heck, right? So, without further ado, I'll show you the app and why I did what I did. Cursor. So the app is just a standard cheesy iOS Cocoa Touch app. It is written in Xamarin.iOS. It's got 3 tabs that divide it. First one is just a list of all the ships. And I have a search controller in here. So you can actually search the ships by name. So if I search the ships by name, I'll search for Abraham Lincoln. And we'll go for the big one here. I'll go 1996 through 2012. And that'll go through, and it'll give me the list of all the locations and then the date it was at that location from the associations. And then I also plot it on a map view. Now you'll notice why in the heck are all these things here?
On the train.
Well, I'll get to why that is. This is another classic data cleaning thing, and I'll get to why that is. But the fun stuff is actually where the Abraham Lincoln actually served, which was the Persian Gulf. So, sure enough, there's lots of interesting things here in the Persian Gulf. And if I tap on one of these pins, it'll zap me right to the ship document in history where that was at. So it'll say, hey, cool, it was in Western Iraq, Air Traffic Control Center in Al-Basra, and you can see all the stuff in and around that pin. So it kind of helps to slice and dice and categorize that. Now I'll get back to this United States thing here. So DANFS, sometimes it's really hard to separate out the reason the ship is named what it's named from its actual ship's log. In this case, these are the travels of Abraham Lincoln. So that's the reason you've got Lake Chicago, Illinois here. It says, let's see here, Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library and Museum in Springfield, Illinois. I can't win. But it's cool, it's a data point, I can process it and I can look at it later. So that's kind of ships in a nutshell, and that you can lather, rinse, repeat that for all the ships in there.
Maybe you can ask the users to vote for the reservation.
Yeah, crowdsource it, that's awesome. Tell me when a pin is bad, and yeah, it's awesome. So the other, actually, that was kind of the second thing I did, the ship one. The first thing I did was I wanted to test the performance to see if I could actually go through 250,000 individual date records. So I did this day in naval history. So this is all the stuff that happened on 9 September in any given year. And it went pretty fast to come up. That was actually a SQLite query. And what's interesting here is, and what I found out really quick is, if I were to have a histogram of dates, because it starts at like 18, wow, sometimes it's really early. So this starts 1754 in some cases. So it would be a giant bell curve. You'd see 1754 up through World War II, and then it would shoot down immediately almost, because World War II is tons and tons of individual events. But I can click on any of these and zap right to the ship document for that given day and see what happened on that day and all that good stuff. So the key there was I was testing to make sure I could actually query 250,000 records interactively. So the next fun one is actually my full-out Battle at Midway thing. So this is a locations searcher. So if I go in here and I search for Midway, and watch it die. Okay, there we go. I must have had a previous search. I'll just do it again. So this is all the locations that have the word Midway in them. Notice that I got a data cleaning problem where some things are still comma delimited, that might have to correct those out or change them or whatever. But for now, it includes any mention of Midway. And I got a big old button down here that will take all of these and give me all the ships and all those locations at all those ships at all those locations across all days. So I'm going to zap to that, and these are all the ships that mention Midway at any given time. And I can then go through further, and I can actually say, I only want the ships that mention Midway that were there June 2nd, 1942, plus or minus 10 days. So I'm going to apply that filter. And the funky thing you find out in here is the ship name history thing, like I was saying before, like ship name history loves doing that. That's the reason the ship is named what it's named. There's going to be a lot of these in here. And the reason is they're all named after guys who died at Midway. So that was an interesting thing. The Navy really liked to name certain kinds of ships for people who had died at the Battle of Midway. And you keep going, and now you hit these ship logs. And in this case, we're starting from May 24th, 1942 through wherever. And I'll just pop in on one of these here. And it'll tell you that this ship was diverted from her patrol area to Midway Island, where she formed part of the submarine patrol as part of the American fleet. So now you can actually totally narrow down through the entire data set and look at plus or minus days. The other interesting thing in here is that if you look for Normandy, there's like hardly any, Normandy around D-Day, there's hardly any activity, which I thought was kind of weird, or maybe I got bum data or something. So if I search for Normandy and just take them all, and then change my date filter to June 6th, the other fun thing is it's kind of like a time machine, which is kind of, I'm a weirdo though, beware. So these are all the ships that were in and around Normandy. You notice that skull bar is not very big, nowhere near what the Midway one was. So I was surprised there weren't as many ships involved there as are in and around the Battle of Midway. But once again, my data set might suck, or it might not include everything I wanted to include. So that's the whirlwind trip through my iOS app and what I did there. Any questions before I keep going? Anything? Everyone bored? Okay, good. So I'm going to go back to presentation here. So I'm going to get techno now. I'm going to deviate from my history stuff. As I mentioned when I started, I'm like a hardcore Objective-C Swift guy. So why did I do this in Xamarin.iOS and not Objective-C or Swift? And the answers are hopefully all up here. It's LINQ, and did I forget to mention LINQ? You don't have those capabilities in Objective-C. You can do stuff in one line that takes you, thousands of lines and bashing your head against stuff. It's brutal in Objective-C and Swift to do half this stuff. Especially System.Xml.Linq. You sit there and look at the iOS documentation, it'll drive you nuts. It'll be like, use libxml2. No, don't use libxml2. You're crazy if you do that. Especially when you've got something like System.Xml.Linq or good XML parsing libraries. SQLite.net is freaking awesome on Xamarin.iOS. And once again, you can just do stuff in 5 lines of code that take you way too much in other things. JSON, you can use the whole surface there sitting in a portable library. It's just great. And for parsing all that reverse geocoding stuff, it's like 1 line of code and you're done. And of course, you can make those libraries portable and make them all that data access stuff and make it work on Android and other Windows stuff in the future. So I'm a hardcore guy, storyboard guy. I don't know if I'm probably going to polarize many iOS people out here, but I love my storyboards. Don't take my storyboards away from me, you'll make me cry. I'm a firm believer in storyboards. The key to storyboards is using segues to bind all that stuff together. So every view you saw up there and all that stuff, that was all done in a single storyboard. I didn't write a single line of navigation code. It was all done in storyboards and all configured using segues. This is kind of the mystery thing. This is the other thing that I do probably different in Xamarin.iOS than most other people do, is I actually use Xcode to edit my storyboards. And the reason I use Xcode to edit my storyboards is because it gives me all the control I want and the control that Apple lets me have. The key is that this control drag drop gesture as you're using the tool, it does everything. It will figure out how to maybe link a control to code behind. Control drag drop will do that. You want to do auto layout and put constraints in, control drag drop does that. You want to navigate between a table, you want to put a navigation between, you tap a table view cell to another view, the control drag drop does that. So control drag drop's truly the one gesture to rule them all in the Xcode editor. So if you've given up on it, or you hate it, or you're like, why is Apple doing this to me? 9 times out of 10, control drag drop will get you out of that scenario. So I'm going to use my MindNode thing for this instead. I plotted out just the standard storyboard route that I used for all this stuff, so I can hopefully show it to you in a nice format here. So my main app, I got my main storyboard. It's got a tab bar controller in it, and that's what's responsible for going to the ships, the today in Navy history, and the locations area. When I go to, I'll start with ships. Whoa, get that out of there. Make this big. I'm afraid to hit full screen out of fear that we won't have any video after I do it. Get that out of there. So up here at the ships layer, I inject a navigation controller so I get my nav bar. And I'll zoom in on a lot of this stuff here. And then I hit my very first table view controller, which is my ship view table view controller. And then I go to my ship view controller, which has the title bar and a segmented control in it. And this segmented control just triggers 2 embed segues to go between the map and the master location list. Those segues just do show segues to show the ship document view controller, where it shoves the GUID of the thing you picked into the view controller, and then it comes up and scrolls to the given spot. And I'll show how I did that too. It's super easy. It's like 20 lines of code. There's no magic to this at all. The other area, I guess the next area to go to in order would be, we'll go to locations next, I guess. So a lot of this is kind of lather, rinse, repeat stuff. I just want to kind of highlight the segue parts in the iOS app structure. So I got my storyboard, my tab bar. I'm going to locations area. This is just location table view controller with a new little cheesy toolbar at the bottom and standard search controller at the top. The ships.location is just a location ship table view controller separate. And then I do a modal segue to go to that date filter thing, and an exit segue to come back. And once again, in code, there's nothing that does this. This is just, I just prep and throw data at stuff. There's no code that says show modal. I have 0 code to do that. That's all storyboards. And then of course I have my show segue to show the same ship document view controller stuff. And I'll go to today history one. A lot of this is boring, lather, rinse, repeat, but I'll just do it anyway. So same thing, navigation controller, go to my root controller. In this case it's my today table view controller, and it just shows the ship document view controller when you tap on it, given the date GUID that shoots over. So that's a quick and dirty tour through the app, all segues. I'm afraid to show the storyboard editor because it's darn near impossible to actually show it, but these do a good job, and believe it or not, the storyboard editor is pretty darn close to the way you see these diagrams lay out.
So they don't call it interface builder anymore, right?
Yeah, they don't. It's hard. I still call it interface builder.
Yeah.
They call it the storyboard editor in Xcode or now, that kind of thing. The problem is all the legacy stuff's still sitting there. So you'll hear nib and zib and all that stuff. And that's literally from what, 1992 in the Next system is where all that comes from. That's what nib stands for, what, Next Interface Builder.
How did you do the XML to HTML conversion?
I'll show you. Hey, that's the next slide. Cool. So how did that? So the HTML, so the document is a UIWebView. And the HTML, I keep it simple. I mean, why overcomplicate it? This is a single method that takes in the ship XML element. And all it does is it says, hey, is my element named date? If it is, shove in a span with the date GUID and any style you want, and just append that into a string that will shoot out as HTML. Then for every child that's in that node, just recursively go back in, try again, and then when you pop out, just write down your end elements. I mean, there's no magic here. This is not super complicated, super easy. But the fun part is that GUID thing, and I'll get to that. Once that's laid down, once you take your XML turn HTML, take your HTML, shove it into your web view through this load HTML string call. When load HTML string is done, it will fire back this loading finish delegate off the UIWebView. And when loading's finished, that means that all your HTML went in, got fully processed. And now you can do this awesome evaluate JavaScript method. And in this case, I said, hey, my controller was fed a ship event that I was going to show, pull its GUID, go to document get element ID, pull that date GUID, scroll it into view, and then set its background color to highlight it. So 2 lines of code, you're done, you can zap to any moment in history. That's kind of neat. Same thing with the location, just lather, rinse, repeat. In this case, you're just using the location GUID. You scroll it into view, and you can call anything in JavaScript here. If you want to go nuts, you can inject a JavaScript file and call the method on the JavaScript function. Call the JavaScript function from Objective-C code. Not shown here, if you really want to get all geeky, is you can actually inject a neat object right into the UIWebView, and you can access it through something called the external. So you can actually I think you can even do it through Xamarin. You can take a view controller and any object you want, shove it in, and then in JavaScript, you go window.external dot and call the method directly on the object from the JavaScript code within the hosted web browser. And that can be supremely powerful for getting data or doing other stuff dynamically. I don't have a slide on that. I should probably put one. The next fun thing in here, and notice I said SQLite was awesome. So over here on the side is a picture of my SQLite browser. It's just a standard SQLite table. And this maps 1-to-1 exactly to a C# class. And all you got to do through the SQLite provider, it's glorious, connection.table of your object name, and it'll automatically pull the table in. And then you can say where and use your link stuff. Now, this isn't just some cheesy like in-memory traversal. This where thing here, this is actually a SQLite-based where it will actually generate a SQLite statement, generate the query SQLite for it at the SQLite engine, and return to you your result. In other words, it maps your link calls to like underlying SQLite calls. So this isn't cheesy. This is like super fast and super awesome. And you got to look at the open source project to know which things are overloaded. There are certain things like there's count is overloaded. I think first is overloaded. A couple other things are overloaded here to actually just go directly to SQLite and do the optimal thing instead of like the in-memory thing. This is, once again, Objective-C, Swift. Yeah, good luck. You'll be here for days and it's not nearly that cool. Plus, you end up, if you really want to go nuts, I cheated, I returned back a list. You can make it an IEnumerable, and the IEnumerable will work exactly the way you think it should. This is my cheesy hack of the day. I despise making custom UI table view cells in iOS. It drives me nuts. My blood pressure goes up at least 20 points every time I'm like, oh God, I gotta make another table view cell. And I will do anything to avoid making a custom one. And Apple gives you really good ones for their stock ones. And because they have UI labels in them, you can actually create rich text through this NS attributed string and feed in the rich text into the stock labels Apple gives you. So you can control the font, you can make bold, italics, put tabs in, you can do paragraphs and formatting, and you can use the existing cells for Apple and just shove in any rich text you want right into it using attributed string. It's a great shortcut when you really don't want to make a custom table view cell. So that's what I've got. Hopefully you guys find your data set and go out and find something cool to do with it. And the tools out there are amazing and free. And of course, sometimes you can hack Google and do some things for free. And anyway, that's what I got. So I have tons of crazy things I'm going to do in the future with this thing. You guys just probably got about 10% of it. I can do crazy stuff like eventually I'm going to try to associate ships at a given location at a given time. So I'll be able to do that. I'm going to pull out people and sort by rank. I can also pull out the ship metrics and bring that in, so I can say, give me all ships that were at Midway at this time that have a length greater than 20 feet, that kind of crazy stuff. and eventually maybe even link to Wikipedia, do lots of other crazy stuff. So kind of only just skim the surface of the kind of stuff I can do with this. So, and my slides have other things you can read if you want to read about World War II stuff and don't want to just read your social studies textbook from old school. And tools, once again, MindNode was used for all the diagrams. Snagit I used for all the screenshots, it's super awesome. And there's this great command line tool called Highlight that lets you shove in any text you want for any code formatting. It'll shoot out full rich text format, automatically formatted for you. That's why I did all the XML. It was one line of code that shot out all the cool purple, yellow XML stuff. So and there's a great guide on how to use that. If you look up Highlight to Keynote, you'll see a whole bunch of good stuff. But once again, all this is in the slides when I make them available. So that's it. Thank you for listening.
Do we have any last questions for Dan?
How detailed are their ship logs? Are they
That's where is
truncated versions
there's-
of them? Or?
Yeah, it's kind of a controversy thing. There's like, when I read about the DANFS data source, it's kind of discredited. A lot of people are like, it's kind of a sanitized version of the ship history, especially when you compare it to like full ship logs or other stuff. It's okay, but it's not great. I did look around, and the National Archives, you can get ship logs from National Archives, but they're huge and they're like classified, and you can't get them in nearly the quantity here. So once again, work with the data you got. It seemed to it kind of seemed to keep moving, so I kind of stuck with it. So,
What's your plan, like when this is done? Like, what do you plan to do with this?
is software ever done?
Not this one.
I don't honestly know. Right now, I've probably got to contact the DANFS people, let them know I did this, because I've never talked to them about anything, and go from there. I don't know. It depends. I'm trying to maybe get more meaningful stuff out of it, get some more visualization things out of it before I say that, hey, this is really cool, and, there's something here. But from a techno demo thing, it's kind of neat. So.
It could be links to movies and stuff.
There you go. So you should do a Kickstarter.
Now, yeah, super long term. I read a lot of history books. When you read these history books, like I said, they're just walls of text. It would be great if you could take all those crazy history books, pull all the stuff out of them, pull the locations, pull the tracks, pull the dates, pull the people, associate it all, and create like full visualizations from the raw text. There are, obviously with machine learning and other stuff, it's coming, which means I think history will become a lot more accessible. So there's my Kickstarter pitch.
There you go.
That would be an amazing investment, I think, in education and finding historical stuff and everything. So yeah, long term that'd be amazing, but short term, I got what I got.
I don't know if you're interested in the actuality, but USS Yorktown was actually retrofitted after the Battle of Coral Sea. So it was not the original Yorktown.
Cool. I wonder if that's in that history or not.
Yeah, if you want to.
I'll have to go dig
retrofitted.
that up. Cool.
Yeah.
Reincarnation.
Yeah, there's lots of ships like that. Like what's fun is the USS Midway, the aircraft carrier. It's not listed here,
Oh.
but the USS Midway, it was an aircraft carrier that was actually a refitted battleship, and it was always unstable in the water. And they were afraid it was going to fall over and sink. And there's amazing stories on the actual USS Midway, but it never did, and it was a very lucky ship. And yeah, there's lots of crazy stories like that about refits and weird stuff. And it's like, this ship was taken, decommissioned, turned into this retrofitted, and now it came out as this. And then there's a separate document that's now for a separate ship. So there's a lot of things like that, yeah. So that's another thing to look for and track and find interesting.